Whether you are a new grad nurse or a seasoned veteran, in this video, I'm going to list out 15 skills that I believe all nurses should have in some fashion, if nothing else, should actively be working on honing and improving. Hey everybody, this is Thomas from NurseMoneyTalk.com, where I help nursing students become nurses and nurses excel in their nurse career and nurse life. And I just want to go through and just kind of list out some important skills that I believe nurses should have, or at least in some degree should be actively striving to improving on if they don't already have it. Before I get started with this video, I want to go ahead and invite you to hit that thumbs up. If you find this video helpful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you do not miss any of our new videos that will be coming up. And also, any links that I mention in this video will be in the description below. So let's go ahead and get started with number one. And number one is really teamwork. And this, being able to work in a team, I think is a very important skill set, because at a minimum, I think for the most part, I can't think of a single nursing profession or specialty, I should say, that doesn't work in some capacity with a team. Even at the bare minimum, you're gonna have probably a physician team, or you're gonna be working with a physician in vast majority of cases. I think one of the things that's very important to understand is that in order to deliver the best possible care and to ensure safety for both you and your patients, it's very vital that you understand just how to work effectively in a team. The second skill set that I think that's very important to kind of get down, and that is just this compassion and empathy, and also being able to really understand the difference. I think both of them are important when you're working when you're working as a nurse, because when you're looking at empathy, it's being able to understand your patient's suffering. So this might be the typical, being able to put yourself in the person's shoes. And compassion is more or less being able to sympathize or show a concern for the suffering or the pain that a patient's going through. And I think being able to have both compassion and being able to empathize with your patients is very important in terms of being able to deliver exceptional care. The third skill that I think is very essential for all nurses to have is just being good communicators. As nurses, we do, for example, like I already mentioned, we work in teams a lot. So you really have to be able to know how to effectively communicate in a team setting. The second thing as well is that as nurses, we do a lot of patient education and teaching. I don't know how many times that a patient will come in, they say that they've been taught X, Y, and Z. After talking to the patient, come to find out that they really didn't understand their education at all. That for whatever reason, there was a disconnect between what the staff member was saying, doesn't necessarily have to be a nurse, and then what the patient was receiving. And so I understand that there's a lot of facets to communication and a lot of potential barriers, but I think something to keep in mind as well is when you're looking at communication, it's that making sure that the receiver receives the information exactly how you intended it to be received. And so it's so many times I've seen communication just kind of go south really quickly, not just when working with patients and educating them and giving instructions, but also when communicating with members of the multidisciplinary team. You say one thing, you intended something else, and then, instructions are carried out in a different manner because they misunderstood what you were saying. Or you say something and then, when you're communicating with somebody and then somebody gets their feelings hurt because you said this and they thought this is what you really meant, when no, this is how you really meant it. I think focusing on honing your communication skills honestly, like it goes a long way. And I've seen a lot of situations where a breakdown in communication has led to a lot of negative outcomes for everybody involved. The next one I want to talk about is number 4, which is having good time management skills. And so number 4 and number 5, which is prioritization, actually really go hand in hand. Because like when you're looking at time management, so a lot of times time management and prioritization, you can't really have one without the other, because like there's a lot of things that needs to be done in a shift, but they all can't get done at the exact same time. So you really have to know how to prioritize your time and saying like, okay, these are all important, which kind of gets to the next one, which is the critical thinking as well, and being able to say these are all important and these all have to get done, but which one is the most important one that needs to get done first? And I think that's where you see time management, prioritization, and then also seeing that critical thinking aspect really just kind of come and mesh together. Which gets me to the next one, which is paying attention to details. As a nurse, there's so many things that requires attention to details, whether it's noticing. For example, you walk in, you look at your patient, and then you just know that something is off. I remember when I was in the ICU, and this was a nurse who had been, I mean, she was a nurse for probably 15, 20 years, and you could tell like her attention to detail was honestly just on another level. And so she walked in and she looked at the patient like at the beginning of the shift, and she was just like, something just doesn't look right with this, with this patient. Like she could tell like there was just something was just off with this patient. Now, granted, this was a patient that she has had for multiple days, so it wasn't like her first time seeing the patient, but at the same time, she was able to notice the little details and being able to tell, okay, something's just not quite right with this picture. Long story short, the patient, I believe, did actually end up coding at some point during the shift. Patient was fine. The nurse was actually like seemed to be well prepared for it, and I think because she was already noticing that, okay, something is not right. This patient seems to be decompensating like quickly. I need to have everything prepped just in case. And so those are the things that makes a huge difference. Like those are the things that is the difference between life and death in situations where every second counts. The next one is about professionalism. To me, I've heard a good nurse is a professional nurse. When you're a professional nurse, you're responsive, you're humble and good-natured to patients and colleagues. You do quality work, are helpful to others, and you take great pride in the work that you do. And I think like when you're looking at the professional nurse, like it represents like nursing in general well, in terms of how you treat the patients, how you treat your coworkers, how you treat the other members of multidisciplinary teams. And even from just a very selfish point of view, like showing professionalism then puts you in the runnings for like whether it's like you're looking at promotions or you're looking at a management position that you're wanting to apply for. You're looking for like maybe a raise or something like that. Some of those like performance bonuses, doing like little things here and there that really shows off how much of a professional you are goes a long ways to that. Next thing is about physical strength and stamina. You've heard this saying like, oh, like this is a no-lift facility. Yeah, okay. In another video, I did kind of briefly touch on how I think, hospitals will say no lift facilities. And while you should strive to do everything you can to protect your back and do, use the lifts and whatnot, that there are situations that just makes it really hard to either A, run and get a lift, or B, like you don't even have a lift that's available on your unit. And I do know some facilities are better than this than others. But the thing about it in general is just that nursing is, there's a lot of manual labor involved in it, especially with inpatient nursing. And so being able to be at a point where you're physically able to do X, Y, and Z goes a long way. Not to mention the fact that if you work the med-surg floor, you are on your feet a lot. You are running. At times, like I've seen situations where somebody has it's a 30 bed or whatever floor, and somebody has patients that are at the far corners of the floor. So if you had I think this one might have been like a circular or an oval, and so they had one here, and then they had one here, somewhere around that. And so my initial thought was, my goodness, some charge nurse really didn't like you. And my second thing with that is that how much physical stamina is needed to be able to run when you have patients spread all over the floor. The next one is about and a skill set that's really important to nursing is being able to manage your stress, because not being able to manage your stress will inevitably lead to burnout. That's just what's going to happen. And so, or at least that's what's a high likelihood of happening, I should probably say. Being able to figure out how you de-stress, how you can leave your work at work, and so when you go home, you don't bring all of that home with you. Because especially if you work in a high acuity floor or unit, you're probably seeing some really, really bad things happening. You're seeing patients who are hurting, family members that are hurting. It's you're seeing spouses who are losing their loved ones. You're seeing people losing their moms, their dads, their brothers, their sisters. It's really hard to see that over and over and over and over again without being affected. And so if you're not careful, it'll bring down, it really will bring you down. And I think, it's just really something to work and strive towards. And some nurses end up being better at it than others. And I think for some of us out there, we just need to, that's something that we actively need to be working on if we want to have a very long nursing career. Number 10 is just having good ethics. Nursing is considered one of the most trusted professions in the country. And honestly, our patients expect a high standard. When they go into a hospital, when they see a nurse walk in, they expect a high standard of ethics. They expect, they expect honesty. They expect professionalism to be shown. And so, so that's just really important. The next one I have is about adaptability, and that's looking at being able to adapt. Healthcare is forever changing. What was commonplace when I graduated is not going to be the same thing, 5 years from now. It's quite possible the second that you graduate that some of the stuff you were taught in nursing school, that a paper came out and said, wait, this is not actually the best way to do it. There's other ways to doing it. And you need to adapt to it. Instruments are constantly changing. The equipment that we use, they're constantly changing. And if nothing else, hospitals, especially when contracts run out, they're constantly changing that as well. We've just had a situation where one of the hospitals I work at, they changed the entire bed at the facility. I preferred the old ones versus the new ones, and the new ones are kind of a pain to deal with. But I mean, that's, I got to adapt to it, and I know I just use a very, kind of not that big of a deal example, but you'd be surprised, or at least I think probably not that big of a deal example, but what's not a big deal to me is going to be a big deal to somebody else. And so in healthcare, you're going to have to adapt. I mean, there's no other way around it because things are constantly changing. The next one is just being a lifelong learner. Remember I said previously that in healthcare that it's constantly changing and you have to know how to adapt to that. Well, what's one of the main things that's going to be constantly changing? That is the knowledge that you have. And so you have to be okay with going out there and doing some research, whether it's like the education your hospital provides, or just looking at the latest evidence-based practice and bring it up to your hospital education department if some stuff's just kind of out of date and they haven't been brought up to speed yet. Those are the things that's important when it comes to patient care, because as new information comes out that provides better patient care, better patient outcomes, you want to be at the forefront of it. You don't want to be one of those nurses who are still doing things from 20 years ago because, oh, that's just the way I do it. Like it was good enough for us back then. No, that it doesn't work like that. It might have been old information, might have been good enough back then before we knew better, before the new evidence-based practice came out. And so when that comes out, you need to be okay with being able to look at that and work on changing your practice to meet with the latest research. The next one is being able to delegate. There's a lot to do in nursing, a lot. And you're not going to be able to do it all. At times, they will act like they expect you to do it all, but realistically, you're not going to be able to. So if you happen to be fortunate enough to have a tech on your floor or on your unit, then make sure you know how to adequately utilize your techs. Make sure you know how to appropriately delegate to your techs. We have an article that we had that talks about delegating. So I'll put a link to that in the descriptions below. And then also when the video comes out, I'll also put the video on delegating, on nurses delegating up top as well. But delegating is important. It's not just about delegating. You need to understand how to delegate appropriately. So for example, you need to know what you can or cannot delegate to. So in the situation of a tech, you need to know what you can or cannot delegate to your techs. And then you also need to know what their competencies are, because just because the rules of your facility says that you can delegate it to them doesn't necessarily mean that you should. At the same time, that doesn't mean to use what I just said as an excuse to not learn how to properly delegate, because it will drive you crazy trying to do everything under the sun. And while there will be days where your facility won't give you any text or anything, and you will be expected to apparently do everything, the few or rare times, depending where you're at, that you do get a tech, learn how to delegate appropriately. So maybe instead of you going in and doing those Q2-hour turns, maybe you delegate it to the tech. Maybe instead of you going in and giving a bed bath, if you're swamped with other things, delegate it to the tech. I mean, delegating is an important nursing skill that I think at times just doesn't get as much attention as some of the the more hands-on skills. The last thing I just want to mention is, as a nurse, you just need to be strong. What I mean by strong is I'm not talking about necessarily the physical strength, which I did mention that already. That is important. But I'm talking about the kind of the strength that comes in when you're making a phone call to a doctor to report a problem with the patient and they're yelling at you for doing your job, and for you calling on them for them to do their job. you have to remain strong at that as well. When a family member starts yelling at you because they're frustrated with what's going on with their loved one, you have to stay strong. Keep in mind, I'm not saying you have to sit there and take abuse from like physicians, other staff members, nurses, or patients. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that, I mean, I don't know how to say it, except like, just, you need to be just have like that strong kind of, like, you just need to be strong, I guess, like, you know, like, just sometimes like the strength of like knowing like I could pick this battle with you right now. So for example, like the strength of like, you're on the phone, the physician's yelling for whatever reason, you're just calling them, you know, because you have a job to do and they have a job to do. And then they're yelling for whatever reason. Strength is you know what? I have a job to do. I have a patient to take care of. I just need you to give me X, Y, and Z. Whatever issues we have, you know, that's for later when I don't have a patient to that needs my help. You know, something like that. You know, I think that's easier said than done, because at times there's a lot of things that nurses that you'll deal with that will just continuously just keep breaking you down. You know, I mentioned the situations with the bad interactions with staff or patients, and those tend to be the ones that I think will break you down the most, because like I could have dealt with 15 patients at my clinic. You know, I could have had 13 of them say that we did a good job. I could have one that raved about how awesome we were, and even, you know, try to bring like cookies or whatever to the unit for the nursing staff. But then I could have that one that comes in, yells, you know, for nothing that we did, but they're just angry for reasons unrelated to the care that we provided, yell at all of us, and yet that one is the patient I will probably remember when I go home. That one is probably the patient I will remember the next day or a week from now or a month from now. And I'm gonna remember that one interaction and not the 13 plus other interactions I had that day that were positive. And so I think that's where that kind of like that strength, that internal strength comes in, because at some point that's, you know, you're gonna have to rely a lot on that. So that's all I actually have in terms of the skills that I really wanted to highlight that I think is important for nurses to have. If there's a skill that you think that's important that I completely missed, let me know in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will catch you very soon in the next video.